This is LBC News.
I'm Jim Diamond. We will look at the Brexit talks. We'll discuss the R number in just a few moments, plus the changes to hospitality in Wales. But first, let's look at the other headline I just looked at, because we did bring you the Chancellor's spending review when it happened. And what we didn't know, or didn't hear from Rishi Sunak, is that Britain's rail infrastructure budget is going to be cut by £1 billion. He told the Commons instead the government would deliver on its record investment plans in infrastructure. Well, it's been confirmed by the Rail Minister, Chris Heaton-Harris, that Network Rail's funding for enhancements during the budget between 2019 to 2024 is £9.4 billion. But that's down nearly 10% on the figure of £10.4 billion, which the rail regulator, the Office of Rail and Road, previously calculated was the budget required for the 5-year period. Let's get a view. Joining me now live on LBC News to discuss just that is Darren Caplan, who's the Chief Executive of the Railway Industry Association. Good afternoon, Darren.
Good afternoon, Jim.
What will this mean for the railways, rail passengers?
Well, I mean, there's two sides to this story. One is the budget cut, and one is to do with visibility of rail projects. And just for the benefit of your listeners, it's probably worth pointing out what a rail enhancement is. And it's the rail enhancements project we're talking about, not renewals and not major projects. So enhancement projects are things like station changes, platform length changes, electrifying a line, bridges, tunnels. And as an example of the kind of projects we're talking about, it's things like adding additional capacity to Leeds Station or improved passenger access on Skipton Colne Line, Birmingham Muir Street, reducing crowding. It's those kind of schemes that are on the existing network that we can make a better and more enhanced network. And our concern is not just the budget cuts, although that's concerning, but it's also the fact that we don't actually know what projects the government is considering taking forward at the moment. So there's a big scheme, there's a process, the rail network enhancements pipeline, and that looks at how you bring those schemes forward. And having been announced 2 years ago, we still don't know which of those 80 projects are going to be taken forward. So there's two issues. There's the budget, but also lack of visibility of what schemes are going to affect passengers. And then just in terms of the passenger issue, clearly there may be an issue around coronavirus and how that affects passenger numbers, but we at RIA think that passenger numbers will bounce back. I think there's lots of reasons why they'll come back strongly. So you need to build now to be ready in the future for those increased passenger numbers when they come back.
Yeah, but when we look at the detail, we hear from the rail regulator put forward the figure that they calculated over a 5-year period, the regulator, the Office of Rail and Road. Why wouldn't the government listen to that recommendation? Isn't that the point and purpose of a regulator?
Well, I think the main issue is when the projects are starting. So it's based on a 5-year control period or a 5-year investment period called control periods, and we're now at CP6. And I think some of those projects haven't started yet. So it may be that the £1 billion is supposed to be rolling over into the next control period. But the fact remains that in this 5-year control period, up to 2024, it seems from the Minister's announcement that we're going to have £1 billion less to spend on rail enhancements. And clearly that's concerning. From an industry perspective, for every pound you spend on rail, you generate £2.20 in the wider economy, and that creates lots of jobs as well. So it's not just a rail issue, it's actually a wider economic and jobs issue too, at a time when we should be building back as much as we can.
Now, it's nobody's, of course, fault in particular in terms of the virus coming and halting our daily lives when the first lockdown happened. And, of course, people were told not to go out and about and use public transport. And, indeed, the government took over the rail franchise agreements from the train operators back in March, and it's estimated £8 billion of taxpayers' money spent in making sure they can keep running these ghost trains, these empty trains, and pretty much in the main compared to what we saw last year. Do you think that's fair when you look at how other travel sectors, like the aviation sector, had no help for ages? Why do the railways get all this help from the taxpayer?
Well, in fairness, I think we should commend the government for what they've done this year with railways. I mean, keeping the railways open have enabled key workers to get around the country, to go to hospitals and care homes. It's enabled freight to move around so goods can get around, particularly at a time when people aren't using retail or going to shops. So actually, there has been a huge benefit to society, and we should commend those people working the railways and commend the government, and particularly the Rail Minister, Chris Heaton-Harris, who has been very positive working with the railway industry to keep the network open. The other point is now is a good time to start investing in the railway and building for the future. If there are less passengers and less trains going around the network, we can invest and accelerate projects and build now and build a world-class railway for the future. So there are benefits to keeping it open to investing in it right now, even though clearly coronavirus has been a tragedy.
But you don't think that some of these rail operators that make a tidy profit in a normal year could take a bit of a bigger sort of shoulder of the burden as opposed to the taxpayer?
Well, the system has changed with that now. So performance has been quite strongly built into how they're paid. So, and the railway industry is part of that. So we've got to make sure we have a good railway network that's renewing, that's enhancing, that's growing and building, and that will enable a better service. And they will only get the so-called surplus if they do deliver on performance areas.
How worried are you during this travel window across the four nations where people can crisscross around the whole of the UK between those dates of the 23rd and the 27th? How concerned are you that people won't have got the message that you need to perhaps get your ticket in advance, and if you turn up on the day, you might be turned away? Can you imagine, or are you worried about any scenes that might happen like that at big stations around the United Kingdom?
Well, 95% of the rail network will be open and ready to use. And as I said, we are a railway industry body, so we would encourage passengers to be aware that travelling on the train is safe. Surveys show that you've got, I think it's a 1 in 11,000 ratio of chance of catching coronavirus. That's without wearing masks and taking part in COVID-safe travel. So it's a very safe form of travel. And I know the government's working quite hard to keep as much of the network open and adding extra trains and extra services. But what I would say is, everyone knows what the coronavirus rules are, and you have to adhere to it. But railway will play its part in making sure that there's a safe network to travel on.
Thank you for joining us live. Much appreciated. Darren Caplan is Chief Executive of the Railway Industry Association. Coming up.